Hello. Yeah, welcome to this discussion on time value of money. Now, I'm going to take you through uh, a number of topics that covers time value of money. So we're going to look at the future value, and this is going to be part one of our presentation. And then in the second part, I will look at the present value. And keep in mind, both the future value and the present value will be a discussion on a single amount. And then I will move forward to part three. And in part three, I'm going to look at how to compute the other variables involved in time value of money. And that is how we can compute the interest and how we can compute the number of periods. And then later on, I'll mention something on payment, but I'm going to leave this later on for a different discussion when we are looking at annuities. So we're looking on annuities, then we are going to try to bring in this issue. So when we get to that part three or part four, sorry, then we are going to address the PMT later on. But we are going to look at two types of annuities, and that is the ordinary annuity, uh, uh, annuity due, and also something else called deferred annuity. So those are the three elements that I'll try to touch on. And then lastly, in part five of our presentation, I'm going to look at uneven cash flows, and I'm going to explain what that means. And part of that discussion could be maybe touch on that deferred annuity, but it's going to be where the cash flows are not the same, and we'll see this when we get to part three. So a five series video touching on time value of money. So I'm going to try to make them as short as possible to cover this concept so that by the end of the fifth part series, then you understand what is involved when it comes to time value of money. So let's just begin with the first part, and that is the future value. Again, remember, we are looking at the future value of a single amount, not a series of payments. This is the future value of a single amount. Now, I'm sure, and I will say this and I will stress it again, the best way to try to understand the time value of money concept or to work through problems will be to use a timeline so that you draw the timeline, and then based on what the problem is giving you, try to enter those values on the timeline so that you have a bigger picture of what you are supposed to be looking or what is missing. So if you use the timeline, you'll find it is easy for us to go this to walk through these problems. And the other thing I want to mention is as we look at the present value, the future value of either a single amount or series of payments, basically the entire time value of money, keeping in mind there are so many ways you can solve these problems. Whether you're looking for future value of a single amount, the present value of a single amount, or you're dealing with the interest, that's the rate, the I, or the N, or the payments, or an annuities, or an even cash flows, you'll find that you can solve some of this problem easily by either again using a financial calculator, and I'm going to show you how this works out. You can also use some financial formula to solve these problems. You could also use Excel to solve these problems. And again, the best way to approach the chapter, I'm going to touch on all of them, specifically on how to use the calculator and how to use Excel. I will try to explain where the formula comes into play, but I will not focus more on the formula because it becomes a tedious process when it comes to dealing with some of these issues that deals with time value of money. So let's jump into our first discussion on future value of a single amount. And I'm going to use this example again, draw the timeline and enter what you've been given from the problem on the timeline, and it's easy for us to figure out what we need. So just let's look at one example, and this is where we are looking at how to determine the future value, but then we are using what we call the formula method. Again, the other methods I'm going to show you later on, but assuming you have to use the formula method just to give you a perspective and understanding where those issues or those values are derived. So if in this example is where you're doing an investment, so you are investing $100. So you're investing $100, and this is being compounded on a yearly basis. So if the compounding is on an annual basis, that's our discussion here. And the rate again you're being given, the compounding rate is 4%. So you have 4% per year, and you're doing an investment for in this example, let's say this investment for 3 years. So you invest this for 3 years. So the investment is for 3 years at 4%, and you're investing today $100. So the question comes into, if you're looking at future value, then we ask yourself what that amount will be in the future. Again, if you draw the timeline, this is the year we're referring to, and time 0, and then end of year 1, then end of year 2, and then of course this becomes end of year 3. So at year 3, so if you're looking this at year 3, so the question is at year 3, how much is your future value going to be? Today, again, you're investing 100. So in terms of the time value of money, any investment you undertake, we always use that to be a negative 100 because it's a cash outflow. So we indicate that with a negative 100. So you invest $100, where in this case, N is 3 years, and our rate is 4% per year. Again, this is compounded on a yearly basis. So the question will be, what will be the future value? And that is, how much are you going to have at the end of the third year? Because this is investment for 3 years. So if you use the formula method, then to determine the future value, we know that to determine the future value, what we do is we take the present value and we multiply this with 1 plus I raised to a power of n, where I in this case is 4%, n is 3 years, uh, uh, and the present value is $100. So to do this, let's say step by step. So you try to determine what the amount, what $100 grow to at the end of year 1. So to do so, you'll have the same formula. The present value, the future value is equals to the present value into 1 plus I. Again, your n is 1, so your n is going to be 1, and that will bring you to $104. So at the end of year 1, how much you have, now your amount has grown to 104. And then this investment continues because you don't withdraw the money, so you leave the money in the account. So the investment is, now you're investing, it seems like now you're investing $100 and $4 for the next 1 year. Again, that case will be the present value of the investment of this 104 for another 1 year, and that will take us to 108. So at the end of year 2, how much you have is 108 and 16, and you continue investing that amount for the second year. At the end of year 3, you'll end up having 112 and 49. So simply put, to avoid the tedious process of trying to figure out how much you have at year 1, year 2, and year 3, the best approach would just be to use the formula. And if you insert the formula, your present value is 100, and your rate is 4%, so that'll be plus 4%, so that'll be 0.04, and your n is 3. So if you're looking at how much you'll have at the end of 3 years, then it's going to be 1.04 raised to 3 times, of course, 100. And you can do this 1.4 raised to 3 times 100, you'll find this to be the same value what you have here as 112 and 49. Again, this becomes a tedious process, but the best way is to simply use the formula, even though, again, the formula becomes a tedious process. So there's a shortcut to this, and I'm going to show you the best way to approach this using other values. So if you want to use a calculator to determine, again, the same computation, 3 years or could be 4 years, but if you want to use a calculator, then it's a very easy process. If you're using a financial calculator, then you should have the time value of money keys. So your calculator should have your time of money keys, which will be, you should have the future value key, the PMT key, the present value key, the interest key, and of course the number of periods. And what you do is you just insert 3, you enter 3 to be the number of periods, 4 to be the number of 4% to be the interest, and you're investing $100 today. So you insert $100. Again, that should be a negative number because it's an outflow of cash, and then you add that should be the present value. And in this case, remember you're investing only one time. So it's just a one-time investment. It's an investment of $100 today, and nothing is invested at the end of year 1, nothing is invested at the end of year 2, and nothing at the end of year 3. So and therefore, your payment at the end of year 1 is basically 0 because there's no additional payments you are investing in that particular account. The same thing at the end of year 2, there's no, so the PMT is assumed to be 0, and therefore we just enter your PMT to be 0, or you could ignore the PMT, aspect of it. But if you have to enter it, you'll enter that to be 0, 0, because you're only investing $100 today and thinking how much that will be at the end of 3 years. And therefore, the 3 years is your future value. So in some of the calculators, what you'll do is once you have entered your N3 and the rate 4% and the PV to be 100 and the PMT to be 0, then to find what the future value will be, then in some calculator you have a CPT key. So it just depends which one you're using. So you'll enter the CPT and you press the future value key, and that will give you a 112 and 49 as the answer to this particular problem. Some keys, some calculators you'll need to use probably maybe the shift key, and then of course to press the future value to determine again what that. So it just depends on which one you're using. So if you're using the normal card, which is basically the 10B, the 10B plus, then of course mostly there will be a CPT compute key, and you're asking the calculator to compute the future value, and that will give you the answer. Again, it's an easy approach of solving the future value using a calculator. Now, the other approach will be, of course, to use Excel. And once you're in Excel, again, you just go into formula section, financial calculator, you can enter the values, or you just do an equal sign in a cell. So you go to a cell, press equal future value into, is going to give you the you enter your rate there, you enter the number of periods. Again, this will be, in this case is you're talking about 4%, you're talking about 3, you're talking about your PMT to be 0, and your present value again is 100. And the type here is basically asking you, the order of those payments. So in other words, is always we assuming these payments is at the beginning of the period or at the end of the period. So most likely by default, the payment is given at the end of the year. So you'll have 0 there, and then of course you enter, and that will give you again a similar answer to be 112 and 49 cents. Again, is an easy approach of finding a solution to the same problem. So there's so many ways you can solve the same problem. Again, either use a financial calculator, either you end up using the Excel or use the formula, or even you can use the financial tables. So another one is the financial tables, and what the tables are going to give you, and you've seen these tables before in, let's say, in business math, for example. What these tables are basically giving you is this. So if you go back to the formula, what the table is giving you is this part. So the table is giving you this value. The 1, for example, the case of the future value is giving you the 1 plus I raised to n, and this is what we call the future value interest factor. So this is what the table is giving you. So you take that value or that factor and you just multiply it with the present value, and that will give you again the same value. So in other words, your calculator is giving you what this value is. So once you have that value, you just multiply it with the present value, which is 100, and you are able to get again the future value. So you could use this method either for present value and the future value. And we're going to see how we do this with the future value in my next series of videos. So look forward for part 2 of our discussion on determining the present value of a single amount using again the same method. So see you in the next video.